Welcome to Two No Stories. Here, we reveal shocking tales of betrayal and deception, where secrets unfold and karma strikes back. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Your support keeps us going and helps bring even more exciting tales to life. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. The sound of the front door clicking shut was the first sign that something was wrong. Daniel Carter looked up from his laptop, glancing toward the entrance of their home. It was late, later than usual. Stephanie was never this late without texting. He checked his phone. Nothing. His wife, Stephanie, had been acting strange for months now. Subtle at first, coming home later than usual, keeping her phone tightly within reach, dressing a little nicer than necessary for work. At first, Daniel chalked it up to work stress. She had always been career-driven, a marketing executive for a big firm in Austin, Texas. But recently, it had started to feel like she was elsewhere. And tonight, the feeling was impossible to ignore. Stephanie walked in, tossing her purse on the counter. Her face lit up with an energy he hadn't seen in a while. She wasn't exhausted. She was glowing. Long day? Daniel asked, keeping his voice neutral. Stephanie barely spared him a glance as she kicked off her heels. Yeah, just a lot going on at work. Daniel studied her. There was something off in her tone, too casual, too rehearsed. She poured herself a glass of wine, leaned against the counter, and finally looked at him. I need to talk to you about something, she said, her voice unnervingly calm. Daniel's stomach tightened. All right, he said, closing his laptop and giving her his full attention. She took a slow sip of wine before setting the glass down, her fingers tracing the rim. I'm going on a date. The words landed like a punch to the gut. Daniel blinked, sure he had misheard. A date? He stared at her, waiting for a laugh, a smirk, some kind of indication that she was joking. But she wasn't joking. She picked up her phone, checked her reflection in the window, and adjusted her dress like she was heading out for a normal night. Hope you won't be too jealous, she added lightly. Daniel felt like his brain short-circuited. What the hell was she saying? What? His voice was barely above a whisper. Stephanie exhaled, as if she were the one dealing with a difficult conversation. I met someone, she said. I've been seeing him for a while now, and I don't want to lie to you about it anymore. I figured being honest was the best thing. She smiled. She actually smiled. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. His hands gripped the table, fingers curling into a fist. Honesty? That was her angle? His mind reeled, trying to make sense of what was happening. She had already been seeing someone else, and now she was just announcing it? Like she was telling him what she picked up for dinner? Stephanie took another sip of wine, completely unfazed. You always said you respected honesty, she added, tilting her head, like she expected him to thank her. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. You think this is honesty? His voice was low, controlled, but barely. She shrugged. It's not like I don't love you. I do. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I want something new for a change. Something new. Daniel felt like he had been punched in the ribs. He thought back to the years, 18 years, of marriage. The sacrifices. The times he had worked late to support their home while she built her career. The vacations he planned. The anniversaries he made special. The nights he held her when she cried over work stress. And now she wanted something new? Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. And you expect me to just sit here while you go on this date? Stephanie frowned, as if he was being unreasonable. I don't see why you'd be upset, she said matter-of-factly. It's just one night. It's not like I'm leaving you. Daniel let out a hollow laugh. She really believed that. She really thought that she could walk out of this house, spend the night with another man, and come back expecting everything to be the same. I'm sure you understand, she added. Understand? He understood that he had married a woman who didn't value him. A woman who thought he would always be there, no matter what. He could feel his chest tightening, the weight of rage, betrayal, and humiliation pressing down on him. But he wouldn't explode. He wouldn't beg. Stephanie had already made one fatal mistake. She assumed he would wait. And she was about to find out just how wrong she was. Daniel forced himself to relax, leaning back in his chair, He studied her, his expression unreadable. Stephanie hesitated, clearly expecting an argument, a fight. But Daniel just gave a small nod. All right. Her brow furrowed. All right? Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. Go on your date, Stephanie, he said, his voice smooth, steady. Have fun. Stephanie looked at him strangely, as if she didn't expect this response. You're not mad? Oh, I'm mad, Daniel said, but you're right. You should do what makes you happy. Stephanie hesitated for a moment longer, but then shrugged. I'll see you later. She picked up her purse, checked her reflection one last time, and walked to the door. Daniel didn't stop her. He didn't yell. He just watched. Her heels clicked against the tile. The sound sharp, final. She reached for the doorknob, and for the briefest second, Daniel thought she might look back. But she didn't. She stepped outside and closed the door without hesitation. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel stared at the door for a long moment, his heartbeat a dull roar in his ears. Then, slowly, he exhaled. He had his answer. Stephanie thought she had all the power in this marriage. She thought she could walk out, have her fun, and come back to a husband who would still be there. She had no idea what was coming next. Daniel stood, grabbing his phone off the counter. There was only one person he needed to call. The line rang twice before a familiar voice picked up. Dan? What's up, man? Mike, Daniel said, his voice eerily calm. I need your help. Mike, his longtime best friend and a damn good divorce attorney, went quiet for a beat. What happened? Daniel glanced at the clock. It had been exactly 2 minutes since Stephanie had left. Stephanie just told me she's on a date, Daniel said simply. There was a pause. Then, Mike exhaled sharply. No ***ing way. Oh yeah, Daniel said, and she thinks I'll still be here when she comes back. Mike let out a low whistle. She really thinks that? Daniel smiled, dark and sharp. Not for long. Daniel sat in the living room, his phone resting on the coffee table. The call with Mike still replaying in his head. His heartbeat had settled, but the fury simmering beneath his calm exterior hadn't faded. If anything, it had solidified into something sharper, more focused. Stephanie really thought she could just walk out of their home, go on a date with another man, and come back expecting everything to be the same. She thought she had all the control. She was wrong. Daniel picked up his phone again, scrolling through his contacts until he landed on the one he needed. He tapped the name, bringing the phone to his ear as it rang. Dan. Hey, Lisa, his younger sister, answered cheerfully. What's up? I need you to come over tomorrow morning, he said, his voice steady. Lisa's tone immediately shifted. Everything okay? Daniel exhaled. Stephanie went on a date tonight. Silence. Then, she what? She walked right up to me, Daniel said, leaning back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. Told me she met someone. Said she's been seeing him for a while. And then she left. Lisa let out a sharp breath. You're kidding. I wish I was. What do you need me to do? Daniel smirked, but there was no humor in it. I'm changing the locks first thing in the morning. I need an extra pair of hands. Lisa didn't even hesitate. I'll be there. Stephanie expected to walk into the house like nothing had happened. Daniel knew it the second he heard her heels clicking up the driveway around 9 a.m. She was late. He guessed her date went well. Or maybe she stayed at his place. The thought made his stomach churn. But he pushed it down. She tried her key. Nothing. He heard the metallic scrape as she tried again, jiggling the handle, growing frustrated. Then, the knocking. Daniel took his time walking to the door. When he finally pulled it open, Stephanie stood there, arms crossed, an irritated look on her face. Why isn't my key working? Daniel leaned against the doorframe, completely unbothered. I changed the locks. Stephanie blinked, her lips parting slightly. You, what? Daniel tilted his head, feigning confusion. You don't live here anymore. Stephanie stared at him, her posture stiffened, her eyes darting over his face, trying to gauge if he was serious. Dan, stop playing, she scoffed, rolling her eyes. Let me in. Daniel didn't move, didn't even blink. Your things are packed, he said, stepping aside just enough for her to see the suitcase sitting in the hallway. Stephanie's breath hitched. You're actually serious? Daniel folded his arms. Dead serious. She let out a disbelieving laugh, shaking her head. Dan, come on, don't be ridiculous. It was just one date. Daniel arched a brow. One date? He let the words sink in before adding, I know you've been seeing him for months. Stephanie's entire body tensed. He saw the flicker of panic flash across her face. Gotcha. Daniel didn't smile, but he wanted to. Who told you that? She demanded. Daniel shrugged. Does it matter? Stephanie swallowed, her throat working as she tried to come up with an excuse. But there was no excuse. You thought you could come home, Daniel said, his voice calm, controlled, but ice cold, and that I'd still be waiting for you. Stephanie opened her mouth, then closed it again. Here's the problem, Daniel continued, stepping forward slightly. You made the mistake of thinking I was an option. Her nostrils flared. You're being dramatic. Daniel let out a breathy chuckle. Dramatic? He gestured to her suitcase. You walked out that door, thinking you could have your fun and come back like nothing changed. But everything changed. Stephanie, you just didn't realize it yet. Stephanie shook her head. Dan, listen, I was honest with you. I didn't sneak around. I didn't lie. Oh, don't pull that honesty crap. Daniel snapped. You don't get points for telling me to my face that you've been screwing around. That's not honesty. That's you rubbing it in. Stephanie looked genuinely taken aback. I thought you'd understand. Daniel let that sink in for a moment. You thought I'd understand? He repeated, his voice deadly quiet. Stephanie swallowed. Tell me something, Daniel said, stepping even closer, forcing her to meet his gaze. If I had done this to you, if I had sat you down, told you I had another woman, and walked out for a date, you'd be fine with that? Stephanie opened her mouth, but she had no answer. Because they both knew the truth. She would have burned the entire house down. Daniel scoffed. That's what I thought. Stephanie took a deep breath, switching tactics. Dan, she softened her voice, taking a step forward. I don't want to throw away what we have. I love you. I just got lost for a bit. Daniel shook his head. No, Stephanie, you weren't lost. You made a choice that didn't include me. Stephanie blinked rapidly, her lower lip trembling slightly. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to actually stand up for himself. She had spent months pulling away, testing the waters with another man, expecting Daniel to be there as a backup plan. But that plan had failed. Stephanie's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, Daniel saw the truth dawn on her. So this is really happening, she whispered. Daniel nodded. It already happened. Stephanie's gaze flicked toward the suitcase. She was out of arguments, out of excuses. And Daniel? He wasn't giving her any more time. You should go, he said simply. Stephanie looked at him one last time, as if expecting him to change his mind. But he didn't, and slowly, reluctantly, she bent down, picked up the suitcase, and walked away. Daniel didn't watch her leave. He didn't wait for her to turn around. Didn't wait for one last plea, one final excuse. He simply stepped inside and closed the door. For the first time in years, the house felt light, peaceful. Daniel took a deep breath, leaning against the door. He had done it. He had taken back control of his life. Then, his phone buzzed. A message from Lisa. Lisa. Locks are changed. You good? Daniel smiled for the first time that day. Daniel. Yeah, better than I've been in a long time. He put his phone down, exhaled, and poured himself a cup of coffee. For the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't waiting for someone who didn't deserve him. He was finally free. Stephanie stood outside the house, gripping the handle of her suitcase so tightly her knuckles turned white. The reality of what had just happened was finally sinking in, pressing down on her like a weight she hadn't expected. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She thought Daniel would be angry, hurt, maybe even cry, but after a little time, he'd come around. He always did. That was who he was. The dependable husband. The one who always made things right, even when she was the one who caused the problems. But this time, he was done. She turned back to the door, half expecting it to swing open. He couldn't really mean this. He wouldn't just let her leave over one mistake, would he? Except, she knew this wasn't just one mistake. She had been testing the limits of their marriage for months, treating Daniel like a safety net, assuming that no matter what she did, he'd still be there. And now she had pushed too far. Her fingers twitched toward her phone. Maybe she should call him. Maybe she should knock again. But deep down, she already knew he wasn't letting her back in. And for the first time in 18 years, she felt something she had never felt before. Powerless. Daniel stood at the window, watching Stephanie as she lingered on the porch, shifting her weight from foot to foot, trying to decide what to do next. She didn't expect this. She thought she had control. She thought she could walk out, enjoy her little adventure, and come back to a man who would just swallow his pride and take her back. Not this time. He turned away from the window. His jaw clenched. The house felt different now. Lighter. As if, for the first time in a long time, he could finally breathe. His phone buzzed. It was Lisa. Lisa. Just checking in. She's still there? Daniel. Not for much longer. Lisa. Proud of you. Bro. About time she got a taste of reality. Daniel smirked. Yeah, it was about damn time. An hour later, Daniel was sitting at the dining table, sipping coffee, when his phone rang. Stephanie. He let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, he picked up, not because he wanted to talk, but because he wanted to hear what excuse she'd come up with. What? His voice was cold. There was a pause. Then Stephanie sighed heavily. Dan, can we just talk? We already did, he said, his tone flat. Come on, she pressed. This is ridiculous. I think we both just need to calm down and... Daniel let out a dry laugh. Calm down? Stephanie, you walked out of this house and told me you were going on a date with another man. What exactly do you think there is to talk about? She hesitated. He could hear the uncertainty in her voice now. I didn't think you'd react like this, she admitted. Daniel scoffed. You didn't think I'd react to my wife cheating on me? I was honest, she snapped. It's not like I lied to you. I came to you and told you the truth. That should count for something. Daniel shook his head, gripping his coffee mug a little tighter. That's not honesty, Stephanie. That's selfishness. You told me because you thought it would make you feel better. Not because you cared how it would affect me. Silence. Then, her voice softened. Dan, please, I don't want to lose you. Daniel exhaled slowly. Stephanie, you already did. She sucked in a sharp breath. But he didn't give her the chance to argue. Click. He ended the call. This conversation was over. Over the next 2 days, Stephanie went through every phase of denial, anger, and desperation. First, she ignored the situation, acting like it was all just a fight that would blow over. Then, when Daniel didn't call, she started sending long text messages about their history, about all the good times they'd had. When that didn't work, she tried anger. Stephanie, you're being cruel. I didn't do anything that bad. You're overreacting. Then, when that got no response, she tried bargaining. Stephanie, what if we take a break instead of divorcing? Maybe we just need space. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't need space. He needed her out of his life. On the third day, she showed up at his job. Daniel was in his office when his assistant, Mark, knocked on the door. Hey, man, your wife is here. Daniel looked up slowly. Ex-wife. Mark blinked. Right. She wants to see you. Daniel sighed, setting down his pen. Tell her I'm busy. Mark hesitated. She's, not leaving. Daniel clenched his jaw. Of course, she wasn't. He pushed his chair back and stood, rolling his shoulders before walking out into the lobby. Stephanie was standing there, arms crossed, clearly expecting a dramatic reconciliation. She smiled when she saw him. Dan, please, just 5 minutes. Daniel folded his arms. Why? Because I miss you, she said, her voice soft and manipulative. Because I know I made a mistake. Daniel tilted his head slightly. A mistake? He repeated. You didn't trip and fall into another man's arms. Stephanie, you made a choice. Stephanie's lips pressed into a thin line. I thought you'd fight for me, she admitted. Daniel stared at her. That's the difference between us, he said. I don't fight for people who threw me away. Stephanie's eyes widened slightly. I don't know how everything fell apart so fast, she whispered. Daniel smirked. It didn't. You just didn't see it coming. He stepped forward, lowering his voice. You thought I'd be waiting. That I'd sit around, Broken. While you decided whether or not I was still good enough for you. You lost me the second you walked out that door. Stephanie. She blinked rapidly, like she was finally realizing the depth of what she had done. Daniel leaned in slightly. And now? Now you get to live with it. Stephanie opened her mouth, but no words came out. Daniel gave her a long, hard look. Then he turned around and walked away. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Stephanie had finally gotten her wake-up call. And Daniel? He was already moving on. The silence in Daniel's house felt different now. It wasn't heavy with tension or thick with uncertainty. It wasn't the kind of silence that made a place feel abandoned. No, this was a clean silence. A peaceful silence. For the first time in years. Daniel woke up without a pit in his stomach. There were no late-night texts from Stephanie. No half-hearted goodnights that felt more like obligations than affection. Just peace. At first, she tried to pretend nothing had changed. She spent the first few days staying with a friend, telling herself that Daniel was just overreacting and that he'd come to his senses soon. But as the days stretched into a week, she started to realize Daniel wasn't coming back. She texted. He didn't reply. She called. Straight to voicemail. Then, she went online. And that's when the real panic set in. Because Daniel wasn't just ignoring her, he was moving on. He had wiped his social media of any trace of their marriage. He had started going out again, grabbing drinks with friends. Hiking on the weekends, and worst of all, he looked happy. By the second week, Stephanie couldn't take it anymore. She showed up at Daniel's house, knocking on the door with the kind of hesitation she never used to have. Daniel opened the door, leaning casually against the frame. Stephanie, he said, his tone flat, emotionless. She swallowed hard. She hadn't expected him to look this different. Not in a dramatic way. He hadn't shaved his head or gotten a tattoo, but he looked lighter. More at ease. And that scared her. Can we talk? She asked, her voice softer than usual. Daniel exhaled, rubbing his jaw. What is there to talk about? Stephanie fidgeted, something she never used to do. Dan, you know me. You know I wasn't trying to hurt you. Daniel chuckled, a short, humorless laugh. Oh, I know you. All right, she sighed, taking a step closer. Can't we fix this? Daniel's expression didn't change. Fix what, exactly? Stephanie hesitated. She wasn't used to him being this unreadable. I made a mistake, she admitted. Daniel tilted his head. Which part was the mistake? He asked. The cheating, or the part where you told me to my face and expected me to be fine with it? Stephanie swallowed. I was honest. Daniel smirked, crossing his arms. You were honest because you thought it would make you feel less guilty. That's not the same as being a good person. Steph. She exhaled sharply, frustration flashing across her face. This wasn't how she thought this conversation would go. You don't just throw away 18 years. Daniel. He didn't even blink. I didn't, he said. You did. Stephanie's breath hitched. She had been waiting for anger, for resentment, for some kind of crack in his armor, something she could use to get him back on the hook. But there was nothing. He was already gone. Over the next few weeks, Daniel's life only got better. He finally reconnected with old friends, people he had drifted away from because he was too busy trying to fix a marriage that had already fallen apart. He started hitting the gym consistently, not for revenge, but because it made him feel good. And then, he met Olivia. It wasn't anything serious, just a friendly conversation at a cafe that turned into an easy friendship. But even that, even just the possibility of something new felt refreshing. Stephanie, on the other hand, not so much. Stephanie finally admitted to her friends what had happened. At first, they tried to sympathize, but the more they heard, the less they defended her. You seriously told him you were going on a date? One friend had asked. Eyes wide, Stephanie had shrugged. I didn't want to lie to him. The room had gone silent. Then another friend spoke up. Steph, that's still cheating. Stephanie had rolled her eyes. No, it's not. I was honest. But that's the thing, nobody agreed. They started pulling away, slowly at first, but soon, she felt it. The distance, the judgment, the realization that she had screwed up in ways she couldn't undo. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the man she had risked everything for, Ryan, wasn't even interested anymore. She had texted him one night. Stephanie. Hey, wanna grab dinner? Ryan. I think we should keep some space for now. Stephanie. Wait, what? I thought we had something? Ryan. I just don't want drama. Hope you understand. Hope you understand. She had used those exact same words on Daniel. And now? Now she was the one being discarded. 1 month after the divorce was finalized, Stephanie tried one last time. She showed up at Daniel's office, waiting for him in the lobby. When he walked out and saw her, he barely reacted. She took a breath. Hey. Daniel nodded. Stephanie. She swallowed, suddenly feeling ridiculous for even being there. She hesitated. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Daniel studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not a bitter one. Just a smile. I appreciate that, he said. I really do. Stephanie's heart leapt. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. Then, Daniel looked down at his watch. I've got somewhere to be, he said. She furrowed her brows. Oh, maybe we can catch up soon? Daniel smirked. And then, as if the universe was delivering the final blow, Olivia walked up beside him. Ready to go? She asked, smiling at Daniel. Daniel turned to her, placing a hand on the small of her back. Yeah, he said easily. Then, he looked at Stephanie one last time. Take care, Steph. And just like that, he walked away. For good. Stephanie sat alone in her small apartment, staring at the untouched glass of wine on the coffee table. The space around her felt cold, foreign, a stark contrast to the warm, familiar home she once shared with Daniel. She had moved in 2 weeks ago, after Daniel made it crystal clear that she wasn't welcome back. At first, she thought she could handle it. After all, she was the one who wanted something new, wasn't she? But now she realized what she had lost. The apartment was nothing like the house she had spent 18 years building with Daniel. The furniture was cheap, the kitchen smaller, and worst of all, it was empty. No Daniel, no warmth, no home. Stephanie swallowed hard, unlocking her phone for what felt like the 100th time that night. She hovered over Daniel's contact. She had sent messages before. Stephanie. Can we talk, Stephanie? I know I messed up. But I don't want to throw everything away, Stephanie. Please. Dan. Just one conversation. But all of them remained unread. She had lost him. For real. And it was entirely her fault. Stephanie sat alone in her small apartment, gripping a glass of wine she had no intention of drinking. The room felt cold and foreign, lacking the warmth she had once taken for granted. She had convinced herself that she could handle this. After all, this was what she wanted, wasn't it? But, she hovered over Daniel's contact, her thumb hesitating over the call button. She had sent messages before. Apologies. Stephanie. Can we talk, Stephanie? I know I made a mistake. I know I made a mistake. Please, Dan, just one conversation. All of them are. She checked Facebook. And that was when the final blow hit. A new picture of Daniel appeared on her feed. He was sitting at a cafe, laughing, and next to him was a woman. Olivia. The caption read, "The best things come when you least expect them. Smile. Stephanie. Lisa. Happy for you. Dan. You dare happy for you. Dan. You deserve this mic. Man. You're glowing. About T-Man. You're glowing. About time you found someone real." She could barely breathe. The worst part wasn't just seeing him with someone else. It was seeing how happy he looked without her. For the first time, she knew Daniel wasn't hers anymore. She could. That night, she drove to Daniel's apartment. She had spent hours debating whether this was a mistake. But in the end, her desperation won. She knocked on the door, shifting her weight anxiously as she waited. When he opened the door, she was struck by how calm he looked. He wasn't a knot piece. Stephanie. She swallowed. Daniel exhaled. I don't see the point. Please. She pressed, voice softer now. Quote. After a pause, she walked in, her eyes darting around the space. It was clean, organized, welcoming. And then, she saw a woman's jacket on the couch. Her stomach cl. I've been thinking a lot. She began, forcing Daniel fold. She hesitated. Quote. Daniel let out a low, humorless chuckle. Step. She couldn't answer. Or, he con. She blinked rapidly, trying to keep her composure. Daniel shook his head. You had a choice, Steph. But Dan, we have years to. She felt her. She hesitated, waiting for one last sign that he would change his mind. But he didn't. Daniel opened the door. Good. She stepped outside, looking back one last time. But Daniel had already closed the door. She stood there for a moment, gripping the railing, feeling the weight of what she had lost. There would be no second chance. No reunion. No fix. Daniel Waugh. And for the first time, she had to live with that. Back inside, Daniel stood by the door, exhaling deeply. Olivia emerged from the kitchen. Daniel N. He sat down beside her, feeling lighter than he had in years. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't waiting for someone who didn't deserve him. He was finally free. What would you have done in Daniel's situation? Would you have kicked her out or tried to work things out?